All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a pretty well-known book,
Oh, yeah.
but a book that maybe not everybody has actually like sat down and read.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels.
This is a big one,
Yeah, it is a big one, and it's also a very controversial one.
for sure.
It was written way back in 1848, so,
Yeah.
we're talking about like a time capsule from a world that was going through some major changes.
A lot of upheaval back then, for sure.
Yeah, so this document was written in the middle of all that upheaval. And what's crazy is that it's still causing a lot of debate.
I think that's what makes it so fascinating, right? Like, how is this thing written so long ago still getting people riled up?
It's true, and our listener wanted to understand, like, what is it about this document that still matters today?
Yeah. What's the big deal?
Yeah, so that's our mission today, to kind of unpack that.
Sounds good.
And to, like, figure out, is history really just one giant class struggle like Marx and Engels claim?
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
Yeah.
And were they right about their predictions about capitalism?
And another big one.
Yeah. And are there solutions?
Ooh.
Well, let's just say, are there solutions still on the table today?
Ooh. That's a good question.
So to tackle all of that, we really got to start with their main argument, like their central thesis,
Okay.
which is the idea that all of history
Okay.
boils down to a struggle between different classes.
Okay. Yeah. The whole class struggle thing.
Yeah, so they're saying from the Roman Empire,
Okay.
with its patricians and plebeians,
Yeah.
to the feudal lords and serfs of the Middle Ages, it's always been about, like, who has the power.
The haves and the have-nots. Yeah.
Yeah, and that conflict is what drives change, according to them.
Yeah. They saw that pattern repeating over and over.
They did. They really
Yeah.
did. And they even have this really famous line that kind of sums it all up.
Yeah. I know what you're going to say.
Freeman and slave,
Yep.
oppressor and oppressed.
It's like they're saying it's just like baked into every society.
Yeah, it's like this inherent imbalance.
It's powerful stuff.
It is powerful stuff. So, they weren't just like some armchair historians.
No, they were writing right in the thick of it.
They were writing in the middle of the Industrial Revolution.
Crazy times.
Yeah, and they were witnessing like the rise of a whole new class.
A new player on the scene.
Yeah, the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, the factory owners.
A bigwigs.
Yeah, so how did they see this new power player changing the world?
Well, they saw the bourgeoisie as this, like, unstoppable force, sweeping away the old feudal order
Okay.
and, like, completely reshaping everything.
Okay.
They actually used some really strong language to describe it,
Oh, I bet.
like talking about how the bourgeoisie has pitilessly torn us under
Wow.
the old feudal ties and replaced them with naked self-interest and callous cash payment.
Intense.
Yeah.
It's like they saw capitalism as this like tidal wave just crashing over everything.
That's a great analogy because they did.
And they saw it reflected in things like globalization, cities getting bigger and bigger,
Yeah.
and constant technological advancements.
It was like everything was changing so fast.
Yeah, it must have felt like the world was spinning.
Right. And all the traditional values getting left behind.
They even wrote this very powerful line.
Which one?
All that is solid melts into air.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
All that is holy is profaned.
So good.
Yeah, it's like they were excited and terrified
It's true.
by what they were seeing.
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
They saw the good, the bad, and the ugly.
all at once.
But they also saw that this new capitalist system
Yeah.
was creating its own problems.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And that leads us to one of their most, like, crucial ideas.
Okay.
The creation of the proletariat.
Okay, so the modern working class,
The workers, yeah.
they didn't exactly have like a very positive view of what their life was going to be like.
Not exactly sunshine and roses.
No, not really.
No.
So how did they describe like the reality of the proletariat?
Well, they talked about the harsh conditions in the factories, the long hours, the low wages,
Yeah.
and how workers were treated like just cogs in a giant machine.
Yeah, like almost dehumanized.
Exactly. They even said that workers were reduced to appendages of the machine
Wow.
and slaves of the bourgeois class.
It's a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah. It's not a happy story,
No.
but it's important to remember the historical context here. You
Yeah.
know, these were really tough times for a lot of people.
Yeah, and they weren't just talking about workers being tired and underpaid.
Right.
It sounds like they thought the whole system was like dehumanizing.
Yeah, they felt that capitalism robbed workers of their creativity,
Okay.
their individuality,
Yeah.
their sense of control over their own lives.
And it wasn't just about like, you know, fixing a few things here and there. They
Yeah,
saw like a fundamental problem
they did.
with capitalism.
Yeah, they argued that it would inevitably create this like huge, impoverished, and super discontent working class.
Okay, so this is where things start to get really interesting because this is where they start talking about revolution.
Right.
So what did they propose as an alternative to this capitalist system that they saw as so flawed?
Well, their vision was pretty radical.
Okay.
They wanted to create a classless society,
Whoa.
a world without private property.
Well, hold on. No private property at all.
That's a common misconception.
Oh, okay.
They weren't talking about like your personal belongings.
Okay.
They were more focused on like abolishing private ownership of the means of production.
Okay, so things like factories and land and resources.
Exactly, the things that generate wealth in a society.
Okay, so they believed that these things should be owned by the community.
Yes, by everyone together.
Okay, that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, so it's not about taking away your toothbrush.
Okay, good.
It's about sharing the resources that create wealth.
Okay, I got it. So how would that actually work in practice?
Well, they imagined this thing called a centrally planned economy,
Okay.
where the state would kind of manage everything.
So instead of the free market.
Yeah, the government would be in charge of production and distribution.
Okay. And that would ensure that everybody's needs are met.
That was the idea.
It's a pretty big change from how things worked back then.
Yeah, and even today, it's still controversial.
Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
Some people might see it as necessary for social justice, and others might see it as like way too much government control.
Exactly, and that's the kind of debate that Marx and Engels wanted to start.
Okay, so we've got this picture. Capitalism is flawed.
Right.
The proletariat is going to rise up,
Mm-hmm.
and a communist revolution is on the horizon.
It's all coming together.
But let's get specific. What did they actually mean by communism?
Okay, good question.
Because it seems like they use communism and proletariat like almost interchangeably sometimes.
Yeah, you can be a little confusing.
Yeah.
But they saw the proletariat as more than just victims of capitalism.
Okay.
They believed that the workers were the only ones who could actually lead the charge for a better society.
So the proletariat was the revolutionary class.
Exactly the key to making communism a reality.
Because they're the ones who experience the problems firsthand.
Right, they're the ones who really understand the need for change.
And they're the ones who have the power to make it happen.
In theory, at least.
Okay, so what were they really hoping to achieve?
Well, they wanted to get rid of the things that create class distinctions.
Okay.
And for them, that meant abolishing private property.
Okay, because if everyone owns the resources together,
Right.
then there's no opportunity for one group to exploit another.
It's about sharing the benefits.
Got it. So this collective ownership would extend to everything.
Yeah, to the whole economy.
Okay. And the people would decide what gets produced.
Exactly, a system where people are in control.
Okay, but what about the state?
Ah, yes, the state.
They talk about it eventually withering away under communism.
That's right.
What did they mean by that?
Well, they weren't picturing like some super powerful government controlling every aspect of your life. They actually believed that once class distinctions disappeared and there was no more exploitation,
Yeah.
that the state itself would become unnecessary.
So it was like a means to an end.
Exactly, a temporary tool to get to a better place.
And that better place is a society where everybody is free.
Yes, free to develop their full potential without being held back by class structures or economic exploitation.
Okay, so it's a pretty idealistic vision,
For sure.
but is it even possible?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, is it realistic to think that we can create a society without any hierarchy or power structures?
I mean, every society we've ever known has had some form of that.
That's true, and it's one of the main criticisms of Marx and Engels.
Okay.
Like, were they being too optimistic about human nature?
Yeah.
Can a complex society really function without some kind of government or authority?
Those are big questions.
They are big questions, and they're still being debated today.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've looked at their main argument about class struggle, the rise of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, their criticisms of capitalism,
Right.
and their vision for this communist society.
A lot to unpack.
Yeah, and we've only just scratched the surface.
That's right.
So in part 2, we're going to dive even deeper into some of their specific arguments.
Yeah, get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, and explore the historical context that shaped their thinking even more.
That's good.
So stay tuned because we're just getting started.
Can't wait.
And in the meantime, listener,
Yes, listener.
think about what we've discussed so far.
Yeah, think about it.
What parts of their analysis stand out to you?
What resonates?
What resonates with the world we live in today?
Yeah, what do you think?
And what questions does all of this raise for you?
Good questions.
Yeah, keep those questions in mind
We'll be back.
because we're going to be tackling them in the next part.
See you soon. Welcome back. Let's dig a little deeper, shall we?
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
Into the heart of their argument.
Okay, so one thing that really struck me as I was reading this was how vivid their language is.
Oh, for sure.
It's not just like some dry economic textbook.
Right.
It's like they're poets sometimes.
They were really good writers.
They were.
Like that line about drowning the most heavenly ecstasies
Oh, yeah.
of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm.
In the icy water.
Yes. In the icy water of egotistical calculation.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that one sticks with you.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. It's like they're saying that capitalism just reduces everything.
Like cold, hard cash?
Yeah, to just like dollars and cents.
That's exactly it.
There's no room for anything else.
No room for sentiment.
No.
Just the pursuit of profit.
Okay, so they also say this thing that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
They talk about how the bourgeoisie has resolved personal worth into exchange value.
Ooh, that's a good one.
What do they mean by that?
Well, they're saying that under capitalism,
Yeah.
your value as a person is basically measured by what you can produce
Okay.
or what you can consume.
It's not about your character or your creativity.
No, it's all about your economic worth.
It's about how much money you have
Exactly.
and how much stuff you can buy.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah, it's easy to feel like you're just a cog in the machine.
Right.
Valued only for your output.
Not for who you are as a person.
Yeah, and that's what they called alienation, right?
Exactly.
That feeling of being disconnected.
From your work, from yourself, from other people.
It's a pretty common feeling, I think.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, feeling like you're just going through the motions.
It's a number.
Yeah, not really feeling fulfilled.
Or connected to anything bigger.
Yeah, so they weren't just talking about making work more enjoyable.
No.
They saw this alienation as like a fundamental flaw.
They did a flaw in the system itself.
Okay, so the problem is much deeper than that.
Much deeper.
So for them, it's not just about finding a job you like.
No.
It's about changing the whole system.
Exactly, because under capitalism,
Yeah?
workers are stripped of their creativity,
Okay.
their individuality.
Yeah.
They become appendages of the machine.
Right, they become like tools
Yeah, producing goods that they don't even own.
and can't afford to buy.
Often. Yeah,
So it's like this vicious cycle.
it is.
And the factory owners, the bourgeoisie,
Mm-hmm.
they're not exactly sitting around feeling alienated, are they?
No, they're driven by different motivations.
Like what?
Well, profit mainly.
Okay.
Maximizing profit.
Yeah, getting as much as they can.
Exactly. And paying their workers as little as possible.
So it's like a built-in conflict.
Right.
The workers want fair wages and decent conditions, and the owners just want to make more money.
It's a fundamental tension.
And they saw this tension, this conflict, as the driving force of history.
The engine of change.
Yeah, it's like a pressure cooker.
Ooh, I like that.
It's constantly building steam.
Building, building, building.
And eventually, something's got to give.
It's going to blow.
They predicted an explosion, a revolution.
Exactly.
Okay, so as capitalism keeps growing,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to create a bigger and bigger working class.
More and more workers.
And they're going to be poor, and they're going to be angry.
And they're going to realize that they have power.
But it's not just about the numbers, right?
No, it's about awareness.
It's about what they called class consciousness.
Exactly.
So it's not enough to just be unhappy.
No, you have to understand why you're unhappy.
You have to see the bigger picture
See how your struggles are connected to everyone else's.
and realize that you can actually do something about it.
That you have the power to change things.
So how do they think that would happen?
How do you go from being just one person
Yeah,
to being part of this massive movement?
yeah. How do you develop that class consciousness?
Well, they believed that it would happen naturally
Okay.
as workers experience the realities of capitalism.
Okay, so like the factory system itself
Yeah, with its long hours and dangerous conditions
would become like a breeding ground.
for revolutionary ideas.
So it's like the factory floor becomes a classroom
That's a great way to put it.
where workers are learning not just about their jobs,
But about the system that's exploiting them.
learning how to fight back.
And that's where the role of a political party comes in, right?
Yes, according to Marx and Engels,
Okay.
the party would act as a kind of vanguard,
A vanguard, okay.
leading the way.
So it's not just about waiting for a spontaneous uprising,
No, it takes organization,
leadership.
strategy.
And that's where the Communist Manifesto comes in.
Exactly, it's a blueprint.
A blueprint for revolution.
A call to action.
Okay, so we've talked about the problems of capitalism,
Yeah.
the role of the proletariat.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go back to their vision of communist society.
Okay.
What would that actually look like?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And to be honest, the manifesto doesn't really give us all the answers.
Okay.
It's more about principles and goals.
So it's not like a step-by-step instruction manual.
No more like a set of guiding principles.
Okay, so let's break it down.
All right.
First, they call for the abolition of private property.
Yes, that's a big one. What did they actually mean by that?
Well, as we talked about before,
Yeah.
it's not about your personal belongings.
Okay.
It's about the means of production.
The factories, the land, the resources.
Exactly, the things that create wealth.
So instead of individuals or corporations owning those things, it would be collective ownership,
Owned by the community.
shared by everyone.
That's the idea.
And that would form the basis of a centrally planned economy.
Right.
So the state would manage everything.
Making sure everyone's needs are met.
Okay, but wouldn't that require a huge government bureaucracy?
That's one of the concerns that people have raised.
Yeah. Could it even work?
Would it stifle innovation?
Would people lose their motivation?
These are all valid questions.
And what about individual freedom?
Another big one.
Some people say that a centrally planned economy would lead to less freedom.
Yeah, less choice, less autonomy.
So it's like this balancing act
Right.
between freedom and equality.
Between the needs of the individual and the needs of the collective.
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
And I think it's important to remember
Yeah.
that Marx and Engels were writing in a specific historical context.
Right.
A time when capitalism was causing a lot of suffering.
Yeah, for a lot of people.
So maybe their ideas were a response to those specific problems.
It's possible.
And we need to think critically about how they apply to the world today.
Exactly, because the world has changed a lot,
It has.
and we need to keep that in mind.
Okay, so we've talked about the complexities of
Yeah.
the manifesto's legacy.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, the inspiration, the missteps,
The debates.
the ongoing debates.
Still going strong.
So where does that leave us today?
What can we learn from it?
In a world facing all these new challenges,
It's a good question.
it is so even with all its limitations, the Communist Manifesto forces us to think about some fundamental questions.
About capitalism, about inequality.
Yeah, their critique of exploitation,
Yeah.
alienation.
The concentration of wealth.
It's still relevant today.
I think so.
I mean, when you look at the gap between the rich and the poor,
Yeah.
the gig economy, the
Uh-huh.
power of corporations.
It does feel like some of their concerns are echoing.
Yeah, like they were writing about our time.
It's kind of spooky, isn't it?
It is a little bit.
But, maybe that's a good thing.
How so?
Well, it means that we're still grappling with these issues.
Yeah.
We're still trying to figure out how to create a more just and equitable society.
So even if a communist revolution isn't right around the corner,
Right.
they're still pushing us to think differently.
To challenge the status
To
quo.
imagine alternatives.
To fight for something better.
It's about not being afraid to dream big.
And to work hard to make those dreams a reality.
So listeners, as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yes, listener.
we want to leave you with this final thought.
One last thing to ponder.
How do Marx and Engels' ideas speak to the world we live in today?
What resonates with you?
What can we learn from their insights
Both the good and the bad.
as we face the challenges of the 21st century?
And continue the fight for a more just and equitable world.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've talked about Marx and Engels' critique of capitalism,
Yeah.
their vision for a communist society,
Right.
the role of the proletariat.
All the big stuff.
Yeah, and now I think it's time to tackle the big question, like what's the legacy
Ooh.
of this document?
Yeah, how did it actually impact the world?
Yeah, like how has this thing written back in 1848?
So long ago.
I know, shaped the course of history.
Well, it's complicated legacy.
I bet.
Full of triumphs and tragedies.
Wow.
And even now, it's still sparking all these debates.
Yeah, about power inequality, social justice.
It's amazing how relevant it still is.
It really is. It's kind of mind-blowing
I know.
that something written so long ago can still have so much power.
It became like a guidebook
Okay.
for so many movements.
Okay, yeah.
Socialist movements, communist movements.
All over the world.
Yeah, from Russia to China.
Wow.
Their ideas were put into action on a massive scale.
But that's where things get tricky, right?
Yeah.
Because the 20th century showed us both the good and the bad
The potential and the pitfall.
of trying to actually build a society based on their vision.
Exactly.
So on the one hand, we have all these socialist movements
Right.
that were inspired by Marx and Engels, and they pushed for some real positive changes.
Like workers' rights,
Yeah.
social welfare programs,
Trying to distribute wealth more evenly.
making things fairer for more people.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that those movements didn't have a positive impact.
Yeah, they really did improve a lot of lives.
But then there's the other side of the coin.
The dark side.
Yeah, the authoritarian regimes,
The suppression of freedom,
the economic struggles.
the human costs.
It's almost like a cruel twist of fate.
Yeah.
The very things they warned against.
Like too much power in the hands of the state.
Exactly, silencing dissent.
Controlling people's lives.
Became like the hallmarks
And the defining features.
of some of the systems that claimed to be following their ideas.
It's tragic, really.
It is. So were those failures like baked into their ideas from the start?
That's a good question.
Or were they the result of like misinterpretations?
Or bad leadership.
Or just the circumstances?
Historical context.
Yeah, it's a debate that's probably going to go on forever.
Probably.
But even setting aside like specific regimes,
Okay.
there are criticisms of their ideas just from like a theoretical perspective.
Yeah, like some people say they were too deterministic,
Okay.
assuming that revolution was inevitable.
Like it was just going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, but history is full of surprises.
It is.
It doesn't always follow a straight line.
No, it's messy.
It is.
And some people say that they underestimated capitalism,
Yeah.
like its ability to adapt and change.
To reform itself.
Yeah.
To find new ways to survive.
Right. So maybe they didn't see the whole picture.
Maybe not.
They also get criticized for not really focusing on other forms of oppression,
Besides class, yeah.
like racism, sexism, homophobia.
They were very focused on economic structures. But today we have a much broader understanding of how all these different forms of oppression intersect.
It's not just about class anymore.
No, it's much more complex than that.
So their analysis is still valuable,
Oh, yeah.
but we need to see it in context.
And consider other perspectives.
Okay, so we've talked about the good, the bad, the complicated,
A whole shebang.
the legacy of the Communist Manifesto.
It's a big one.
It is. So where does that leave us today?
What can we take away from all of this?
In a world that's facing so many new challenges.
Well, I think even with its flaws,
Yeah.
the manifesto forces us to confront some really uncomfortable truths
About capitalism.
about inequality,
About power.
about the way our society is structured,
Yeah, and their critique of exploitation, alienation.
the concentration of wealth.
It still rings true today.
I think so, too.
I mean, look around.
Yeah.
The gap between the rich and the poor is growing.
Yeah.
The gig economy is creating all sorts of new problems.
Yeah.
Corporations have so much power.
More than ever.
So even though a global communist revolution might not be on the horizon,
Probably not.
Marx and Engels are still pushing us
To think critically.
to challenge the status quo,
To imagine a better world.
to fight for what's right.
To keep pushing for change.
So listener, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Communist Manifesto,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with this.
Final thought.
What do these ideas mean to you?
What resonates?
How can we apply their insights?
To the challenges we face today.
It's up to all of us to keep asking these questions,
To keep the conversation going.
to keep fighting for a more just and equitable world.
That's the real legacy of the Communist Manifesto.
And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.